Good evening, beautiful people. Here is Giacomo. I'm your host from the Health Advantage podcast. Welcome to another episode. Now, today, if you're watching this on video, you might see that it's dark and I'm recording with the lights on, so the lighting might be a bit funny. But other than that, let's introduce today's topic. So today, I simply want to talk about the difference between lowering your calories and increasing your cardio or your physical activity output when trying to improve your body composition and particularly lose body fat. And again, this is quite a common topic, and it's quite a common mistake that I've seen and I keep seeing repeatedly over and over again. So I decided that it was worth addressing for the sake of an episode. Probably going to be a short one, but again, let's delve into it a bit more in depth. So, as I mentioned, one of the most common mistakes that I see repeatedly over and over again when somebody is trying to lose body fat and improve the body composition is to essentially going from 0 to 100, and in particular when it comes to food and caloric intake, to drastically trying to reduce the caloric intake, the food, as much as possible. And that obviously is something that can be achieved or is achieved by different ways, either with a time restricted feeding approach or cutting all your carbohydrates, for example, or just generally just trying to eat less. So if our goal is to improve our body composition and in particular to try and lose a bit of body fat and trying to increase a bit of muscle mass, then for sure reducing a calorie intake is the way to go, I would say. But we need to be smart and careful with this approach, and we need to be considerate, essentially. And this is because when you are too aggressive with your caloric reduction, so when you cut too much food altogether all of a sudden, especially at the beginning of your fat loss phase, of your cutting phase, you are probably going to incur in a few risks which are not easily managed if you're not if you're new to dieting, and if you're not an experienced bodybuilder. So if you haven't been through a few phases of cutting and bulking. So one of these risks or problem, I should say, is that by, as I said, going from 0 to 100 real quick, like Drake would say, your adherence will be highly compromised. And by that I mean that essentially by going from 0 to 100, by reducing your calorie intake from nothing to a lot from one day to another, you're going to make things much harder for yourself, because obviously your body is used to eating way more than that, and trying to impose straight away a big restriction is going to automatically trigger much more hunger, much more cravings, and therefore might potentially makes things way harder for you to maintain that the low caloric intake, because you're basically going to be starving. And obviously, by being starving, the diet fatigue will increase much quicker, and therefore you're going to be much more tired straight away from after a few days or even weeks to try and your body will constantly try and make you eat more, essentially. And the second and probably even bigger problem that we are going to get to, if this is the scenario, is that even if you manage to stay consistent, and despite the 0 to 100 increase or decrease in calories, I should say, in calories, you manage to stay consistent, and you manage to resist that level of restriction, then the problem is that if you do resist, your body will come into place at some point, and essentially metabolic adaptations will occur where your fat loss will plateau and stall at a certain point quite early on to the stage of, I must say. Now it depends obviously from person to person, but this is usually the scenario that we will see. Okay, so at that point you are left obviously with one or two options. So essentially the further decreasing calories, which as you probably guess is not great, or start increasing your cardiovascular output, and essentially just adding a little bit more of movement in your day than you're currently doing, and or increasing your amount of sessions, steady state, low intensity cardiovascular activity, or LIS, as is referred to from the literature and the scientific community. So now, the point I want to say from here is that obviously we can use that approach of increasing the cardiovascular output and increasing our cardio sessions before we lower our calories to an extreme level. So therefore, increasing the cardio before lowering the calories, essentially. And this is also true because by continuously reducing your caloric intake, you're not just renouncing to extra calories, which in people's opinion, in people's head, means I'm renouncing to more calories, aka I'm gonna lose more fat, aka this is gonna get done quicker. But you're also renouncing, together with those calories, to the nutrients that come from these calories. Okay, and for example, probably the most important, if not one of the most important nutrients that we're renouncing to, is the extra protein that comes from the extra calories. And the extra protein we need, not just when we're trying to build muscle mass, but also when we're trying to lose body fat, because obviously by having a continuous uptake of protein throughout the day and throughout the week, we continuously spiking up muscle protein synthesis up, which will be necessary for us to try and maintain as much of our lean mass as possible, as we're trying to improve our body composition. So therefore means that we're trying to lose body fat, but we're trying to maintain or even increase a little bit our lean mass if that's possible. Now that might not be feasible if, as I said, like we cut our calories too much too quickly, and we need to continue going down that path. So sacrificing more calories than needed means that we sacrifice more macronutrients and micronutrients than needed, and therefore we sacrifice our ability to maintain and fuel the lean mass that we have accumulated and the lean mass that we're trying to promote to stay into our frame and to even grow. If the caloric deficit is not too far down the line. And therefore, so you're essentially putting yourself at risk of losing muscle mass altogether. And this is something that I've noticed with myself as well. When I went through cutting phases without cardio and just trying to reduce as much calorie intake as possible, than what is being called the mini cat, for example, where I've cut my calories short as much as possible, essentially, for a short period of time. And then I compared that when I did a smaller cut, where it took me a little bit longer, I keep calories a little bit higher, and I increased the caloric output by adding 1, 2, or 3 low intensity steady state cardio. And the difference that I've seen in my physique, both in the muscle mass that I maintain, but also in the look that I maintain, is completely different. And as I said, like much more fuller look and much more obviously better performance in the gym, but much more so like better look in terms of like muscle density when I compare the two pictures, essentially, after these two these two phases that I've done it at different points in my journey, in my lifting journey. So yeah, this is pretty much the advice that I wanted to talk about today. So it is obviously easier to choose to skip completely cardio because it's not clearly very light, and it's especially at a low intensity. You know, something like going on a treadmill, on a bike, on a stationary bike, can be quite boring. But it is also much more useful. And even though you might be completely against the feeling of sweating, of feeling out of breath, or you get bored too much too quickly into the treadmill or whatever cardiovascular exercise you chose on to rely, they're also going to be beneficial, not just for your for the possibility to maintain your calorie intake up, but also obviously these efforts will increase, first of all, your cardiovascular health, which is very, very important, I should say, and this should be just only for that should be the reason why we should be doing it a bit more of that, and if not doing it at all, then you should start doing some of it. And also obviously our insulin sensitivity, nutrient partitioning, metabolic flexibility, which I'm probably going to cover more in depth into another episode, but essentially means the ability of the body to process the glucose that we just use it as a fuel, and to essentially not store it as much as fat, not needing as much insulin also to store the glucose. So essentially to not constantly putting our body into more stress, to having to produce more and more insulin to distribute the glucose into the bloodstream, but also to be better able from our body to process and distribute the nutrients that we take, and to serve as a fuel, as I said before. So depriving yourself of more and more macronutrients and micronutrients, it is therefore not really beneficial. It's not really the best and smart approach that you can take. And cardio will be your friends in making you eat a bit more, not making you feel as hungry probably as you would, especially if you do the low intensity steady state cardio, which will definitely use less of your glycogen stores, and definitely use less of create less stress in the body as well. Because as we know, like exercise is a stressor, and high intensity exercise, high intensity cardiovascular bouts can and do increase appetite, especially if you're already into a cutting phase. So it is up to preference, of course, but I hope that with the reasons that I've given you today, and with the things that I've stated, with the facts that I've stated, really, I made my point where you do understand the importance of adding a little bit of cardiovascular activity, adding a little bit of extra movement into your day, rather than just focusing primarily on cutting calories as much as possible from the get-go, and then not knowing where to go after you get to a plateau, after the metabolic adaptations kick in and your fat loss is stalling, and essentially you get stuck to a point where you don't know actually where to go. So this is my brief tip for today, and this is my my take on what has been my experience in both coaching my clients, seeing other people doing it, and also doing it for myself. And I can guarantee that, for as much as I said before, that it is tempting to reduce your calorie intake as much as possible, and you're trying to maximize your fat loss, and you trying to get it out the way as soon as possible, then that might not be the smarter approach. And sometimes, like the tortoise and the hare, sometimes it's better to take a slower approach, and actually promoting a little bit more of calories out by our exercise and by physical activity, rather than just reducing caloric intake. So thank you very much again, guys, for today and for another episode. I'll speak to you soon on to the next one, and have a great day. Have a great night.